am very proud to come from a working class family in Greenock. I'm very proud to have been a member of this club for 37 years. Not the longest member, not the longest serving member. There are people who've been a member for even longer. But it is a long time. And I want to take you this evening to a part of Greenock that you'll know, central Greenock. Tenements in Wellington Street. It's May, it's the 6th of May, the year is 1949. We go into the dark close. The Leary has already been to light the gas lamp. We go right up to the highest bit, to the attic, and here is Elizabeth Doole, and she's scrubbing the stairs. And she's exhausted, as well she might be, because she's 9 months pregnant, and as they say in Greenock, nearly better, but not quite. In she goes to her attic flat, and moments later, her husband, Willie Doole, comes running up, and then, yes, thank goodness, there's a third set of footsteps, and it's the midwife. In they go to the house, into the front, to the bedroom, but oh dear, there is a problem. Mr. Doole, these curtains do not close. Could you please get a safety pin? So Mr. Doole has to scrabble about for a safety pin to close the curtains. This must have been for low-flying aircraft. Now, fortunately, this was a very quick event. 30 minutes only. Isabella Elizabeth Doole, 5 pounds 4 ounces, was born. Quite a good story, but not nearly as good as 8 years before, not in central Greenock, but in the west end of Greenock. Not up in the attic, but down the dunny. Another Greenockian was born 8 years before, none other than Ian McCrory. But the war is over now, 1949, the war is over, still rationing, still have rationing, but Clement Attlee is the Prime Minister, and the second in the leadership is none other than Herbert Morrison. And you may have been wondering what your bits from the Telegraph are, and you'll see Herbert Morrison's speech, which he made not at the prestigious Mother Club, but at this club, the 43 Club, which were trying to find out exactly what it was. So none other than the Deputy Prime Minister on the 26th of January 1951 gave the speech at the 43 Club. And the Telegraph were trying to whip up a bit of rivalry between them. Now, the Mother Club recorded it in their minute book, and later on, if anyone wants to come and see it, they recorded it in their minute book and also cut out the article from the Telegraph and stuck it in. Now, you've got 2 pages because on the 27th in 1951, they gave an account of Herbert Morrison's speech. So that, I thought you'd be interested in. So you can take those, sheets away. I thought it was interesting. And as someone else said, it's so good to see the old-fashioned adverts and to see how things have changed. So there we are, the war is over. Now in this house, in this attic flat, what have we got? Well, we've got no washing machine, we've got no fridge, we certainly don't have a computer, there's no car sitting outside, no computer, probably worst of all, there's no telephone, neither landline or mobile. But what is there? Well, there's a very posh display cabinet. Nothing really to display in it, but display cabinet. And there are seven companion sets. You see, in those days, they didn't have a wedding list, so the 7 companion sets were the wedding presents. So there we are. Now, this Willie Dool, they are living, the Dools, in a flat owned by Blair the Joiners, because that's what Willie Dool does. He works for Blair the Joiners. Now, Blair are still a firm in Greenock, and lo and behold, coincidence, they are also sponsors of Greenock, the Mother Club. Amazing. And that's who Willie Dool worked for. But he was determined. He was determined that he would have a house of his own, that he wouldn't be living in a rented property. And so he decided that up where Blair were building houses, he would build one of his own. And he did at the top of Newton Street. It took him 2 years going every single night after work and at weekends, so tired sometimes that he lay down and just went for a sleep. But he knew if for one night he didn't go, that would be the end of it. And friends of the folks in the Burns Club, Ralph Clark, still live in that house, 117 Newton Street. So there we are, that's the start. Now we move on to the 60s. Now there's a complete change in the 60s when I'm moving too quickly on to the 60s, because in the 50s, Isabel Dool had to go to school, right? And that's why I changed my name. I never ever wanted to change my name, but Dool and school and fool were just too much. So I did. My mother, of course, didn't want, because that was, of course, when we went to the 70s. I didn't want to change my name. Anyway, at the school and at home, we had to speak properly. There was none of this I, no, he'd, bought. Certainly not. Under no circumstances. When I was writing this speech, I started saying I was encouraged. That was a lie, right? We were not encouraged, we were told. And in 1950 odds, when your mother told you to do something, you did it. There was no negotiation, speak properly, end of story. Same when you went to the school. But this wasn't too good for the Scots language. But of course, we've got the Burns Clubs. And we've got the Federation, famously started by Colin Ray Brown and the two Davids, David Sturrock and David Mackay. And they push, right from the start, right from 1885, they push for the Scots language. They see that it's important and that we have this in Scotland, we should be proud of it and use it. So all the way through, we should be grateful to Burns Clubs and the Burns Federation for maintaining that we have that input, because the education department were against it. And it was only in very recent times that it's dawned on the education department that in Scotland we've got 3 languages. We've got English, we've got Gaelic, and we've got Scots. And they push for it now. And that's very, very important. But if it hadn't been for that, goodness knows where we would be. Now, at school, I was very keen and enthusiastic, and some of you may be wondering how my stories changed from, if any of you had seen the little bit that the Cumnock Club had recorded, because by the time I got to primary 7, I had done quite well in all of the classes. I was usually first or second, but I was traumatized in primary 7 because I was not first, I was not second, I was third. Well, that meant you didn't get your picture in the paper, right? Because it's only the ducks and the runner-up. And I was so traumatized and mixed up about it that I thought I was third in the Burns Prize. But I've looked at it very closely, and I was not third in the Burns Prize. I won the Burns Prize, right, in primary 7, right? They probably thought we better keep her quiet. She's no first, she's no second. But anyway, I got the Burns Prize. Now, there's a mysteries come out, because my Burns Prize, which was given in 1961, has a Renfrew Association of Burns Club label. The prize was presented by the 43 Club. Now, we don't know what this 43 Club was. if you read the article in the Telegraph, it says it's not a Burns Club. Well, what are they doing if they're not a Burns Club using a Renfrewshire Burns Association label? Anyway, I've got the archivist at the Maclean Museum onto the case, and we will be finding out. Some of us have got a theory that it could be to do with a police club in Tom Street, which was 43 Tom Street, and their proper name was Police, Athletic and Literary Club. So we're wondering if it was a group of folks from them. When I spoke to Ian White, he won the prize in the secondary for writing about Burns, and I thought his was the Victoria Burns Club. No, he said, it's the same as yours, it's the 43 Club. But he thought that it was maybe just a group of men. Anyway, To a Mouse was what I had to write about to get the prize. And I have no idea whatsoever what I wrote about, and I cannot remember any discussion of To a Mouse at all. But it has always a special place in my heart. And I got the label. They didn't give you the book. I take it was a postal order, but we were given 5 shillings. Now, those of you, Jean, of course, knows my mother well, Mariette, and my mother was very canny with money, very careful. You know, she never spent much, you know, very careful. Unlike her daughter, that's often what happens. So when we went to get it, now I probably was thinking Enid Blyton would be quite a good wee book to be getting, but Mother was absolutely adamant. You've won the Burns Prize, it's a Burns book you'll be getting. But when we got there, the Burns book was it wasn't 5 shillings, we did 5 shillings postal order. The Burns book was 7 and 6. Well, this is the most amazing thing, because Mother shelled out. And as Arthur said, your mother has got share in that book. So that set me off. And I'm so glad that Christine Currie is here with us this evening, past president, with that wonderful Burns supper that they managed to have against all the odds last year. Just absolutely terrific. And so Christine's going to speak a little bit about To a Mouse, and she's going to recite it for us. Thank you so much, Christine. Thank you.
Before I do this, I have to be absolutely honest and say that when Isabel asked me if I would recite this particular poem this evening, my initial reaction was, you must be joking. Because this is a Burns poem that I never perform in public. Now, it's not because I don't like it, but it's because, believe it or not, it is one of the most technically challenging poems that he ever wrote. I know now that in many circles it's really become accepted as a poem that's suitable for young children to perform, but I have to really disagree. Yes, on one level, I can accept that it can be performed as a poem about a mouse, but on another, like many great works of literature, underneath you will find what actors talk about as the subtext. And this is where, really underneath, there is so much more going on than what you are actually saying. Now, I've got to stress that as I move into this, these are just my thoughts, and everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but I do find, as I started to think about it, there's a lot of similarities between this poem and a lot of great works that have come in the years that have followed. Now, those of you who know me well will know that I am absolutely besotted by Arthur Miller. As far as I am concerned, he is the greatest playwright that has ever lived. His work is amazing. I mean, just show me an Arthur Miller play and I am there. Now, if you look at the final scene in All My Sons, where Joe Keller actually says the line, yes, Larry was my son, but I guess they were all my sons. Those 12 words actually is where he admits to being responsible for the death of thousands of air pilots. He also has caused his own son to commit suicide. It is the most powerful line to be delivered by an actor. And I feel, in a way, if you take To a Mouse, the best laid schemes o' mice and men gang after glee has exactly the same effect. Everyone here will know what he means by that, will feel what he means by that. It really speaks volumes, and it relates to everyone. And of course, it also led to the title of Steinbeck's book. Also in the same way, back to Arthur Miller, The Crucible. Now, The Crucible is not a play about witches. Yes, okay, there's a lot of witches in it, but it's really a play about power, paranoia, corruption, and lies. It was written in 1953, almost making a comparison between the Salem witch trials and what was going on with McCarthyism in America. It is so powerful. And same way, To a Mouse, in my opinion, has got nothing to do with a mouse. Yes, at the start, okay, the narrator sees into the mouse's situation and that describes the fate of the mouse. And as that starts to escalate into such wonderful Scots words, with a great sound attack such as sleety durable and cranrach cold, we do begin to sense feelings way beyond simple worries about this small animal. And this builds. It builds until by the last verse, the poem tells us that this mouse can't experience anything more than the current moment. So the anxieties in this poem are not the mouse's, they are the narrator's. This poem, like a lot of Burns, is self-obsessed. It's very dark, and its message ends up being almost as bitter and as hopeless as any written by Burns. This is not a child's poem, in my opinion. Now, you are perhaps privileged, perhaps not, because I never do this in public, but here goes, for Isabel.
Thank you.
Wee sleekit coor and timorous beastie, oh, what a panic's in thy breastie. Thou needna start a waty hasty wi' bicker and brattle. I would be laith to run and chase thee wi' murder and pattle. I'm truly sorry. Man's dominion has broken nature's social union and justifies that ill opinion that makes thee startle at me, thy pale earth-born companion and fellow mortal. I do't not whiles that thou me thieve, which then, fair beastie, thou mun leave. A demonic and a thrave's a small request. I'll get a blessing with a lave and never miss it. Thy wee bit hussy, tay and ruin, its silly wars the winds are strewing, and Nathan new to big a new in old fogate green. And bleak December's winds ensuing, baith snell and keen. Thou saw the fields laid bare and waste, and weary winter coming fast, and cosy here beneath the blast thou thought to dwell till crash. The the cruel coulter past, out through thy cell. Oh, that wee bit heap o' leaves and stibble has cost thee mony a weary nibble. Noo, thou'st turned out for all thy trouble based hoose or hold, to thole the winter sleety dribble and cranrach cold. But Moosey, thou art no thy lane and proven foresight may be vain. The best laid schemes o' mice and men gang after gley, and lay us naught but grief and pain for promised joy. Still, thou art blessed compared with me. The present only toucheth thee, but oh, I backward cast my eye on prospects drear, and for it, though I canna see, I dread and fear.
Now we've moved to the 60s. E.P. Thompson has brought out The Making of the Working Class, and we have discovered social history. And as you know, when we had Vincent Gillen a couple of weeks ago, that's exactly what Vincent Gillen is, a social historian. Well, I had got to Greenock High School, and my goodness me, it gives me such pleasure to see that one of the teachers who changed my life in Greenock High School is with us this evening. Olive Bolton, as she was then, Olive McCrory. Because the music in the 60s in Greenock High School was the best, I would say, certainly in Scotland, if not in the whole country. It was life-changing music, life-changing. And coming from a working class home where my parents were very encouraging, they didn't know anything about music. They certainly allowed me to have my own music in the 60s, so the Beatles were heard all the time, but they didn't bring that. And if it had not been for my experience in music, I would be a very, very different person today, and I would not have been able to embrace all the other aspects that we went on to do. Now, the music was important. What was happening in the English department to do with Scots? Not a lot. The poem which was chosen to initiate us, I loved poetry at the school and I loved the way it was taught, English poetry. But for Scots, they chose the Cotter's Saturday Night. Now, I can appreciate the Cotter's Saturday Night now. I was a rebellious, very rebellious, anti-authoritarian 16-year-old. I thought, this is rubbish. I did not like it one bit, and it did not take me towards Burns in any way. And it was through the church that I became introduced to Burns, and of course that woman who introduced so many people, because at the church where singing in the choir was with myself as a small girl was Miss Mabel Irving. And she initiated us into Burns just in the passing. But it took her a long time to ask me to join the Burns Club. In fact, she waited until I was a hide before she asked me. So we've got to go, because, I mean, we just don't have anyone in the Burns Club, you know. So once I was elevated to hide status, I was invited to join. That's not till 1984. Anyway, in the 60s, there was revolution, there was all manner of things, and I was very rebellious. There was the Vietnam War, my goodness me. But by that time, I had focused on what I was going to be. I was going to be a teacher. That was it. End of story. and I was completely focused on that. So the riots in London and Paris passed me by, the Vietnam War, I could understand it was a worry, but I wasn't engaging in it because I was going to be a teacher. So once I got to college, I was fanatical, and college I went to on father's advice. My father was very, very influential in my life, and there was talk about going to the university, but father sat me down. He said, Isabel, if you go to university, it'll be a struggle. You might do all right, but you'll struggle. If you go to Jordan Hill, there's a possibility you could do very well. Well, being fanatical and having the whole family, including husband-to-be, engaged in the studies, I was fanatical at Jordan Hill and managed to graduate with distinction, right? And I only got to the university when I retired. And my God, my father was right. It was a struggle. But my father was a determined man, very determined. He had no sense of rhythm whatsoever. Isn't that true, Jean? Right? In his 50s, he, with my mother's help, a natural teacher, learned to dance and got medals for it. Determined. The dual way. So there we are, after college. So it's the 70s. What's happening in the Burns Club? Oh, well, in 1971, they decided that they would ask said Miss Mabel Irving to give a talk to toast St Andrew and Scotland. Well, that's what they did. They allowed women in on special occasions in the olden days for little tea parties, and as the 70s came and the 60s too, Mabel wasn't the first to do the toast to St Andrew in Scotland, but I think she must have made an impact. And I'll tell you why. In 1977, James L. Dow, who many of you will remember, a marvellous minister in the town, and much more than that, great in theatrical circles as well, he was the bard of this club. He had retired and he lived in Arran, but he was still the bard of the club. He died. Now, I've checked the minutes. There was only one person that they had in running to be bard. I've checked, and it's Miss Mabel Irving. They asked her in 77, 78, and she agreed. Now, I think maybe she was in cahoots with said Harry McGillop, because they were great friends. And he was on the executive committee. Now, in 1976, the vote had gone completely, no women. There was to be no women. But they knew themselves, when they asked her to be bard, they knew they were in dangerous territory. But they did go ahead and asked her to be bard. But then, of course, she was the bard who was bard. And that made the national press. And they realized that they were getting not a very good press, because she was good enough to be the bard, but she was not good enough to be a member of the club. So there we are. But they pressed on, and in 78, they decided that they would talk this over at the AGM. And I think it was 79 that the vote went through. It did not go through unanimously, and I add, it was not a unanimous. In fact, it was quite a close thing. 18 for women, 13 against, 2 abstentions. The abstentions are not noted. We don't know who it was. But it went through, so they could now put into motion for women to become members. But they weren't really very relaxed about it, and my evidence for that is, you'll be interested to know, because they were starting to plan the Burns Supper for 1981, and they realised, because in 1980, Mabel Irving and Irene Gatherer were members, right? So, and then another 2 or 3 women, Jane McGill, Betty Kidd, and Anna McLean joined. So there was actually 5 women. Now this is directly from the minute book, and this shows their concern. With women allowed, many male members might wish to bring their wife. And if no restriction was imposed, the situation could get beyond our control. Pending experience of the changes, it was resolved that for our next celebration, this is the one in 81, members would still be allowed to bring guests, but only members of their own sex. So there was 8 women and a whole lot of men. But it shows you that they were still nervous about having women in the club. But once Mabel was there, my goodness me, she was a force to be reckoned with. But of course, she was one person, and round about her, at that time, I think there was a magnificent 7. There was Harry McGill, who had wanted women into the club, but also was determined to revive the schools competition. Now, at the turn of the century, at the end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century, there were huge entries, something like 300 in different competitions for the schools competitions. And Harry was determined to bring that back. So he was very, very important in the club, very, very important. But so too were all the other different presidents who came along, each bringing with them something special. Douglas Geddes, and it's because of Douglas Geddes and his rendering one evening in this room, it must have been 84 or 85, he explained and read the Holy Fair. And I asked young David here if he knew the Holy Fair. He said no. I said, can you learn it? Now it's 27 verses. I don't know how many verses he's got, and he's even allowed to do a preamble when he comes to it. But Douglas Geddes went out into the community. He did a lot for the Burns Club, in the club, and then went out into the community, entertaining and bringing the club, getting the reputation of the club. Of course, and again, I'm so thrilled to see Elizabeth Glennie, because Jack Glennie was a president who went all over the world speaking about Burns. And the CD that you heard when we were coming in, Jack introduces that CD and finishes up on the CD. So Jack took the club all over the world with his talks. Rankin Kelly, who was important on the schools committee. He was the secretary of the schools committee, Mabel, of course, in the chair. And in those days, we had a Renfrewshire committee. So the folks came down from Erskine and from Paisley, and we met in Mabel's house and got all the things in order. There was Alistair Anderson, who again was always keen on learning. He was a great fan of Hugh McDermott. And he used to go to Glasgow to the seminars and told us about them, and off we went. And I thought, well, why can't we have a seminar in Greenock? And the very first seminar, which we had in 1997, Alistair chaired that for us, and we had Liam McIlvanney, who's now world famous. Oh my goodness, he was so nervous. In those days, he was just a young lad, Donny O'Rourke, and the other gentleman whose name I couldn't remember, Archie McConnell. So we had 3 folks in that seminar. We also, of course, had George Bryden, Mr. Personality, just incredible. What a miss he is to the club. And he too went out into the community telling folk about Burns. The number of Burns suppers that he did in any one year was just absolutely incredible. And George's favourite poem was Mary Morrison. And it took me years to realise how true and the significance of that one line. She wasna Mary Morrison. but it took me years. It wasn't one. Some Burns poems, it takes you a while to come to them, and I always remember that for George. So you'll be pleased to know that we're soon coming to when, because I'm learning all the time, and that's what I've most enjoyed about this club, is when you come and you're learning things. You're learning about Burns and all the different things, and I learned from all of those presidents what a rich experience we had. Of course, I missed out Bobby Pete there, and that would have been tragic. Now, Bobby was against women, and that's not why I've left him to the last. Certainly not. But Bobby did not want women in the club. I can't say that he ever made that obvious to me, but I'm told quite clearly that, he didn't want women in. But I was speaking to Jessie Cameron, who's not able to be with us this evening. Jessie joined the same year as me, 1984, but she was in first. She was there at the same time as Rankin Kelly. And she said, no, you're quite right, he didn't want women in, but she said he always was very keen when I came along. She said, and he always met me with a kiss. And I said, oh, well, that was... So, but what Bobby Pete did want, always wanted, was the club to have its own premises. He was so keen on that. Many's the talk we had, could we get the Dutch Gable house? Do you know, every time I go into our premises now, I think about him and I say how proud Bobby Pete would be to see the lovely space that we have. Now, Bobby had a good space in the Maclean Museum, in the Watt Institution, right upstairs. There was a little room there, smaller than what we've got now. So that was the Magnificent Seven, who all contributed towards my having a training to be president. And of course, luck has always been with me. I have been a very lucky person throughout my life. And luck played a part because I was president in 1996, which was the bicentenary. So I got to do all the wonderful things and go to Dumfries and have a great time. But I don't know about you, but I could do with a little cup of tea. So I think we'll stop there.
In Burns Day, a holy fair, or as the Kirk would call it, a sacramental occasion, took place every August in Mauchline, in a field. It was organised by all the local parish churches who got together to provide communion, mainly, but there was also all the ministers took turns at delivering sermons and leading prayers. Burns' poem contrasts the religious purposes of the event with the behaviour of many of those attending, who went along for socialising, drinking, and general conviviality. Upon a summer Sunday morn, when nature's face is fair, I walked forth to view the corn and snuff the collar air. The rising sun o'er Galston muirs with glorious licht was glinting. The hares were purpling down the firs. The laverocks, they were chanting fu sweet that day. As lithesomely I glowered abroad to see a scene sae gay. 3 hizzies, early at the road, came skelping up the way. Twa had manteels of doleful black, but ane with lyot lining. The third, that gaed a wee aback, was in the fashion shining, fu gay that day. The twa appeared like sisters twin in feature, form, and clays, their visage withered lang and thin, as sore as ony slays. The third came up, hap step and loop, as light as ony lambie, and wi' a curtsy, loaded stoop, as soon as e'er she saw me. The bonnet aff, quoth I, sweet lass, I think ye seem to ken me. I'm sure I've seen that bonny face, but yet I canna name ye. Quoth she, and laughing as she spak, and taxed me by the horns. Ye, for my sake, hae gained the feck of all the 10 commands as screed some day. My name is Fun, your crony dear, the nearest friend ye hae. And this is superstition here, and that's hypocrisy. I'm going to Mauchline Holy Fair to spend an hour in Daffin. Can ye'll go there? Yon uncle pair, we will get famous laughing at them this day. Quoth I, with all my heart I'll do it. I'll get my Sunday sack on and meet ye on the holy spot. Faith, we say fine remarking. Then I gaed hame at crowdy time, and soon I made me ready, for roads were clad frae side to side with mony a weary body in droves that day. Here farmers gashing, riding Graithgate, hodden by their cotters. There swankies young in braw-braid claith are springing out the gutters. The lassies skelping, barefoot thrang, in silks and scarlets glitter, with sweet milk cheese in mony a whang, and farrels baked with butter. Full crump that day. When by the plate we set our nose, we'll heap it up with halfpence, a greedy glower black bonnet throws, and we mun draw our tuppence. Then in we go to see the show. On every side they're gathering, some carrying dales, some chairs and stools, and some are busy blethering full loud that day. Here stands a shed to fend the shores and screen our country gentry. There, Racer Jess and 2 or 3 whores are blinking at the entry. Here sits a row of tittling jads with heaving breasts and bare neck. And there a batch of Wabster lads, blackguarding fly Kilmarnock, for fun this day. Here some are thinking on their sins, and some upon their clays, ane curse his feet that filed his shins, another sighs and prays. On this hand sits a chosen swatch with screwed up, grace-proud faces. On that, a set of chaps that watch, thrang winking on the lassies, to cheers this day. Oh, happy is that man and blessed. Nay wonder that it pride him, whose ain dear lass that he likes best comes clinking down beside him. With arms reposed on the chair back, he sweetly does compose him, which by degrees slips round her neck, and loose upon her bosom, unkenned that day. Now, all the congregation o'er is silent expectation, for Moody spiels the holy door with tidings of damnation. Should Horny, as in ancient days, among sons of God present him, the very sight of Moody's face to his ain head hame had sent him with fright that day. Hear how he clears the points of faith with rattling and thumping, now meekly calm, now wild in wrath, he's stamping and he's jumping, his lengthened chin has turned up snout, his eldritch squeal and gestures, oh, how they fire the heart devout, like cantharidian plaisters on sick a day. But now the tent has changed its voice. There's peace and rest, nae languor, for all the real judges rise. They cannae sit for anger. Smith opens out his called harangues on practice and on morals, and off the godly pour in thrangs to gie the jars and barrels a lift that day. What signifies his barren shine on moral powers and reason? His English style and gestures fine are all clean out of season, like Socrates or Antonine or some old pagan heathen. The moral man he does define, but ne'er a word of faith in that's right that day. In good time comes an antidote against that poison nostrum, for Peebles frae the Waterfoot ascends the holy rostrum. See, up he goes, the word of God! And Meek and Mim has viewed it, while common sense has ta'en the road and off and up the Coogate, fast that day. Wee Miller neist the guard relieves, and orthodoxy rabels, but in his heart he weel believes and thinks it auld wives' fables. But faith, the birkie wants a manse, so cannily he hums them, although his carnal wit and sense at times, like Halfland's, overcomes him at times that day. Now, butt and bend the change house fills with Yilcock commentators. Here's crying out for bakes and gills, and there the pipe stoop clatters, while thick and thrang and loud and lang, with logic and with scripture, they raise a din that in the end is like to breed a rupture of wrath that day. Leaves me on drink. It gies us mair than either school or college. It kindles wit, it wakens leer, it pans us full of knowledge. Be it whiskey gill, or penny wheat, or any stronger potion, it never fails on drinking deep to kittle up our notion by night or day. The lads and lasses, blithely bent to mind both soul and body, sit round the table weel content and steer about the toddy. On this end's dress and that end's look, they're making observations, while some are cosy in the nook and forming assignations to meet someday. But now the Lord's ain trumpet touts till all the hills are raring, and echoes back return the shouts. Black Russell isna sparing, his piercing words like Highland swords divide the joints and marrow. His talk of hell, where devils dwell, our very souls does harrow with fright that day. A vast, unbottomed, boundless pit, filled full allowing brunstain, with raging flame and scorching heat, would melt the hardest whinstane. The huff asleep start up with fear, and think they hear it roaring, when presently it does appear 'twas but some neighbour snoring asleep that day. 'Twould be our lang a tale to tell how money stories passed, and how they crowded to the Yill when they were all dismissed, how drink gaed round in cogs and cops among the forms and benches, and cheese and breek frae women's laps was dealt about in lunches and dodds that day. In comes a gossy gash guid wife and sits down by the fire. She draws her kebbuck and her knife. The lasses they are shyer, the old guid men about the grace. Frae side to side they bother, till some ane by his bonnet lays and gies him it like a tether full lang that day. Way sucks for him that gets nae lass, or lasses that hae naething. Nae need is he to say a grace or melvy his braw clothing. Oh, wives, be mindful. Ain't yoursel how bonny lads you wanted, and dinna for a kebbuck heel let lasses be affronted on sic a day. Now, clinkum bell with rattling tow begins to jow and croon. Some swagger hame as best they dow, some wake the afternoon. At slaps, the billies halt a wee, while lassies slip their shoon. With faith and hope and love and drink, they're all in famous tune for crack that day. How mony hearts this day converts, o sinners and o lassies. Their hearts o stain gae nicht, are gain as saft as ony fleshes. There's some are full of love divine, there's some are full of brandy, and mony a job that day began may end in och magandy some other day.
David Brown, so you've made my evening. Thank you very much indeed. Well, I'm now president of the Mother Club. It's 1996 and great excitement. We are going to the schools competition, and it's been going for about 9 years by now, and we got into the swing of things the very first year that I went to the competition in 1988. Thinking I knew a thing or two about the recitation of Burns and the standard that would be required. After all, I'd been at Inverclyde Music Festival and heard speaking. But when the prize winners came on at the national competition, and a little boy from Kilwinning got up and said, addressed to the toothache, I nearly fell off my chair. Number one, I would have said that was too difficult a poem for a P7 pupil. I was wrong, and oh my goodness, what a wonderful rendition he gave. But that first year, the divide between the ordinary people like myself who were there and the high-hegians, and there are many high-hegians here this evening, was quite marked, because when the competition, I think we had a break in the competition, well, there was nae tea. There was no party, as I would call it, for anybody apart from a high-hegian. Now, Mabel, in that day, was a high-hegian, and she was whisked away to have tea and whatever. We were not. Now, I must have gone on about it. I know you'll think that that's not unlikely, but I must have. Because on the Monday morning, I had two pupils in, a little girl singing the Sky Boat song, and her sister played the piano for her. On the Monday morning, in comes Pauline with a poem that she has written in Scots, entitled Nae Tea. And we Julie, it was marvellous, the poem, and I said, I'm going to send this to the Federation and give the Federation their due. They didn't put it in the Chronicle, but in those days we had a little magazine called the Burnsian, and they had the grace to publish it in the Burnsian. But, of course, hoist with our own petard, by doing this complaining, the next year it was decided that Greenock would host the competition. And so we had to see to the purvey. But we needn't worry, because Harry McGill was in charge of the purvey, and I think it was terrific purvey, and set the standard for many years to come. Now, in 1996, and when I was president, I kept scrapbooks. I'm very glad I have, because you forget things. And I think I have about 11, but I've only looked out a couple this evening, and I was looking at one which tells about the competition that year. And it's a picture from the Great Telegraph with 6 pupils from Inverclyde schools who made up 6 of the team. There was 8 in the team for going to Dumfries it was. The other 2 were from up county. So we did very, very well. But it doesn't tell you in that article in the Telegraph that when we were at the Watt College waiting, and I was just back from a week's holiday, as some would say, it was the educational excursion, and those who are not in education do not understand what that entails, but I had been away for a week with the little cherubs, and when you come back you're exhausted, but whether you're exhausted or not, it's the Burns competition, get yourself down there. Now, my tradition when I'm away on an educational excursion, or I never phone home, never. What's the point? You can't do anything if there's problems, so don't phone home. So I hadn't phoned home. So I did not know that that very week, when I'm away with the children, there is an auditor in the school. None other than our own Sandy Reddy. So when I'm standing at the bus stop and the bus has not come, I'm getting in my left ear, with the auditors. I mean, you're away and we had the auditors. I said, oh. And he's coming back to see you. So that was my weekend room, because I thought, oh my goodness, what on earth. So we stood there, waiting patiently. Mabel, Elspeth Howe, folk from St. Lawrence's, no bus. The bus did not come. We realised after a while we would need to do something. Well, Mabel, she had to go home, right, because there was no way, there was no room for her in the cars. We had to get the children to the competition. Once we'd worked that out, there was no room for myself and my pal in the cars. we had to go by train. Now this would have been all right, except because I was El Presidente, I was dressed up. I don't think it was this suit I had on, but it could have been because I've had it for 25 years. But I had on the high heels. Not good when you're running the train. Not good. But down we went, got to the competition. What had happened was the bus had gone to the Watt Institute, or the Maclean Museum, as it was called, the Watt Library, and we were standing at the Watt College. So all was well when we got there, we got back. Well, despite all that difficulty, the news in this bit tells us that we won the best team. Renfrewshire won the best team, and it says that we had, this was the 3rd year in a row that we had won the best team. And Nicole Irvin, whom some of you will know, because she, when she was older, came and assisted Margaret Kane in her work as archivist. And Nicole was the Young Burnsian of the year, that very year that I was president. So it was a lovely occasion after the worry of no bus and hearing that you've got the auditor in the school. Now, when the auditor came, and I can't remember which day of the week it was, but the room that I had at that time was a converted toilet. We were very short of space in Ravenscraig Primary, and the kiddies' room was very large and palatial. And I thought, no, we'll need this for something else. And I'd moved out, and I was actually in a toilet. But resplendent on the walls of my toilet, there was quite a lot of buns. So when young Sandy Reddy came along, we got off to a good start, because it transpired that he too was interested in buns. I thought, keep him off the audit. And not only that, after a little while I found out that he did recitations. Well, at that point, I was looking for someone to do a recitation, and lo and behold, young Sandy agreed that he would come along to the Mother Club and do the recitations in 1997. And he's basically been here ever since. So that was my best efforts there, Sandy. We're so pleased, and I'm so pleased that you and Christine are here this evening. So lots and lots of schools competitions, but we always had to be adding something to it. The business with the schools and the Burns Club is so important. We have to have that link in the schools to keep Burns alive. And very quickly we decided that we wanted to encourage the youngsters from the special schools, from Glenburn and Lilybank, because at this point they weren't taking part in the competitive part of the recitation or the singing or the instrumental playing. And so we added to the competition the art competition, which is now quite an important feature of our school's competition. There was always talk of having a secondary competition, but I resisted that until I retired, because it took such a lot of work organising the primary competition locally, and we waited until I retired. But now we have both primary and secondary competitions and the art. But we must always be looking for new ways to embrace the link and develop it. And I'm very pleased that we're trying to do that, because unless we get young people into the club, and when I look back, I was only 37 when I joined the club. So we really need to be sure that we get folk, younger folk, in to keep this wonderful club going. So there we are about the thing. So I had a wonderful year, and a highlight of it, of course, was the week in Dumfries, where there was a whole week of celebrations, Monday right through to the Sunday. So Mother and I decided we would go and stay, and none other than Jean ran Mum and I down to Dumfries, and we stayed for that entire week. Well, again, I got a shock. The first night was the children's competition, and a boy and a girl, primary school, got up, and between them, they said Tam O'Shanter. Now, I was talking when we had our evening with Colin Ray Brown, and we had visitors from Dumfries. One of the Dumfries ladies was telling me that the lad who said the poem in 1996 is now a Burnsian, a member of a Burns club, and doing very well, very, very well. But that was a tremendous thing to hear. Primary people, the two who did it between them, Tam O'Shanter, quite a task. But there was all different things. There was a classical concert, there was a seminar. It was terrific. And of course on Sunday there was the parade, and I had the honour of laying the wreath at the mausoleum, and that was very, very special. But again, members of the Greenock Club came down so that we had a good representation down at Dumfries. But it was a very, very special year that I had to be president. I was very lucky that that happened that particular year. And my mum enjoyed it too. We went out, another special bit was on the Wednesday when we went out to the Brow Well. Now my granny lived not far from Dumfries, so I knew Dumfries very, very well. Although you wouldn't have thought that when we got lost very recently trying to find the Brow Well this year when we were going to the service. We were very late to it. We used to go out a run in the car on a Sunday afternoon. And this run out in the car always took us to the Brow Well. And we were in the car and Mum and Dad would say, yes, that's us at the Brow Well. No mention was ever made of Robert Burns. Carmen and I had no idea whatsoever what we were doing at the Brow Well. And then from there, we went on into Glencaple. Well, we knew about that because we stopped and got an ice cream. But this Brow Well was a mystery to me. I had no idea until years and years later that this was where Burns had taken the waters and then walked out to stand in the Solway as the seminar, the doctor, Dr. McCulloch, McConnell, it said, obviously hastened his death, but on the Wednesday we went to the Brow Well. Well, they'd fairly spruced it up from when Carol and I had been. Of course, it was the bicentenary, and I understood then just what the Brow Well was. And it was Murdo Morrison who gave the oration, and Betty Haining was there, and it was really memorable. At last I knew about the Brow Well. But it was a great week, and I was really pleased to have been able to spend that with my mum. It was a special occasion. And Alan and Christine, you were down too at the parade. It was a very, very special occasion. But then a few years on from that, the Burns Club's always moving on. And 2001 was special, and Elliot will be pleased to know I've got another photograph for you. Elliot, taken in 2001 over at the Greenock Club, before it was the school, where we had a celebration in July to celebrate or commemorate the death of Burns. And I think it's got a dozen presidents. We're all standing there, and I brought it along this evening for you, so don't let me forget. So in 2001, this little booklet here was printed, and when you came in you would hear the music, which was the music of the Wherries are on it, Ravenscraig Primary School, and a number of children reciting and singing, and that was from the school's competition. Now I was delighted when Kenny Wilson was here just a few weeks ago, and he was telling me that they still get orders for that CD from America, and that in Norway they use it for their Burns supper. It's a lovely CD, and that was made in 2001 along with this book, which was published. And it was in this book that I read of the controversy which is in the Telegraph, because they're saying that this 43 club has got a more impressive guest list of speakers. Well, they had the Deputy Prime Minister, Herbert Morrison, giving the speech, and they're trying, I think, to get a little bit of rivalry going. But the Mother Club wrote about it, but very sensibly, but they cut out of the Telegraph the articles, and Margaret's brought the minute book along, because the minute books in this club are so important, and it gives me a chance to pay thanks to Margaret Kane, because in preparing for tonight, I've been at the Burns Room a couple of times just to check up on exactly what was happening and how it was minuted. And that's where we got that lovely bit about them getting a wee bit worried that they were going to be overwhelmed with the women. And of course, that's not happened at all. So, Margaret, thank you very much for all the assistance you gave me, we have such a lot of memorabilia and minute books, and this evening Margaret Dixon was showing me the little booklets that we have with all the members' names, and that allowed me to know that it was 1984 that when I joined. I knew I was a Hede, but I didn't know whether it was 84, 85 or 86 that she asked me, but that was I was able to prove that it was as soon as there was a Hede she asked me, because it was 84. I'm in the list in 84. I think maybe Mabel, of course, I can make up a lot of things, but I think perhaps Mabel paid my subscription for the first year. I could be wrong about that, but I think maybe she did. So there we are. But this, if you haven't got, this is a great book with lots of chat about the club, and as I say, that gave me the story of this bit of rivalry between the 43 club and the Mother Club. My father, as you'll have heard tonight, was a huge influence in my life, and the very last conversation that I had with Dad, he died on the Tuesday, but I was down on the Sunday, and it was the 10th of January, so it was coming up for festival time. And he said, "Right, Isabel, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, Dad, we're very busy with the festival." "Oh yes, but what are you doing next?" I said, "Dad, could I not get the festival over first?" "No," he said, "you must always be looking ahead. What's next? What's next?" And that was something that I learned from Dad, and also the headmaster at King's Glen School, which was my first part of teaching, where I learned more from the children and the parents at King's Glen than I ever taught them. It was a most incredible experience in that school, because the children, I know you're not going to believe this, but I was brought up to be seen and not heard. My mother and father were very quiet people and did not wish attention drawn to themselves. But at King's Glen, the children there, they didn't believe that. And I took my lead from them and was hugely influenced by them. Now, in this 21st century, what's the Burns Club been up to? Well, so much. I remember coming up from Largs when I was looking after Mum and going to the refurbishment, the service that they had for the refurbishment of Highland Mary. Now, that had already been done 20 years before when I was president, but it didn't last, and they needed to do it again, and I think even better. Now, that was a totally memorable day. In here, it was full with people from all over, and long will that stay in my memory. I was so proud that day to be a member of this club. I thought it was just fantastic. So that's one thing, and I know that Billy McCready had a lot to do with that, and Margaret Dixon as well. Huge amount of work. So that's fine. But don't rest on your laurels there, because what are they up to next? Well, they've got that room down there at the E&A, and that was again Margaret, Billy, Alan, and Margaret. what a work and what a joy that is for us all to have that room down there. And how proud we were at the Colin Ray Brown dinner when people from all over were coming, and they were, because we were able to open out into the kind of foyer bit. How posh was that when we were having our wee tea? It was just tremendous. It looked so grand, and we felt so proud. That's number 2. Right? And we're not finished yet. Because in the year when basically everyone else, things are cancelled, what happens? This woman here organises a Burns supper online, on the Zoom. Now, what a work that was, but accompanying that was the booklet, so that we had both. Absolutely fantastic. But we're not finished yet, because somebody else has an idea about Colin Ray Brown. And we have the dinner, totally memorable. It seems ages and ages away, but it was only a few weeks, and we're not finished, because hopefully, fingers and toes crossed, because if anything happens and I do not get to London for a little look at the shops, I will be devastated. But we are hoping to go to London to meet with the folks of the London Burns Club and to pay tribute to Colin Ray Brown. So we should be so proud of this club. Tremendous. But as Dad says, what next? What next? And I know that there's a lot of new ideas, and we've got to embrace these ideas. With the technology, we've got to move with the technology and use it to our best interests. It's a fantastic resource. The schools, we've done well in the past. It's a long tradition, but we've got to build on that tradition. We've got to go from strength to strength. We've got to look to the future, because otherwise the club it'll not survive, and we will survive. There's no two doubts about that in the Greenock Burns Club.